Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. Oh, so now he's going back to the point where he first met Kurisu. Oh, this is going to be very hard for him. Thinking back, that was the beginning of everything. I wish I'd never met her. If only I'd have known this would be the result. If I'd never met her, I wouldn't have to feel this way. Oh, I felt something soft touch my face.
私が怖がっているとママがよくこうしてくれたの。
どうして？
だってオカリンさんすごく辛そうで今にも泣き出しそうなんだもん。
Kagari patted me on the head again and again as if I were a child.
あいつとクリスと初めて会ったのはここだった。
She is there for him.
この踊り場？
あ、最初の印象は最悪。初めて会ったっていうのに上から目線だわ、睨みつけてくるまで可愛さのかけらもなかった。もっとも向こうだってそう思ってただろうけど。
Oh, it's okay. Kagari's here for you, Rintarou. After all, at the time I was rambling about nonsense like organization agents.
それでもクリスさんはオカリンさんにとって大切な人になった。
That was in the Alpha World line though. Right after I met Kurisu in this one, she'd...
私の顔ってクリスさんによく似てるんだよね。
どうしてそれを？
真帆さんから聞いたの。それでネットで調べてみたんだけど自分でもびっくりするくらい似てた。そんな人の記憶が私の中にあるなんてそれも運命なのかなって。
Fate. It always was. Fate laughed at us. It toyed with us.
ねえ、もしも
A drop of rain ran down Kagari's hair and hit the floor.
もしもね、椎名かがりの記憶がなくなって完全にクリスさんの記憶に入れ替わるとしたら、そしたら私は牧瀬クリスになっちゃうのかな。
I don't even know if she should do that or not. It's
でも
just...
もしもだよ、もしもそうなるならオカリンさんは嬉しい。
She's trying to help, but I don't know if it's the right
ク
thing
リ
to
スさんになっ
do.
たらオカリンさんは嬉しい。
I've seen this kind of thing before. It was the voice of the demon I tried so many times to ignore. Yeah, I didn't want that. Or did I?
でも
You can act like her, but you will never be her.
私はやっぱり嫌だな。
Another drop of rain struck the floor.
このまま自分がどうやって生きてきたのかもわからないまま誰からも必要とされないまま消えちゃうなんて。
かがり、
私どうなっちゃうのかな。私は
Kagari was shaking a little. It wasn't just because of the cold.
ごめん。
いや、
I never did figure out what she was apologizing for.
このままじゃ風邪をひく。そろそろ帰ろう。
とにかく上がってください。
You really miss, as Maki say. The first time I went into Lukaku's room, it really did look like a girl's room.
うわあ、二人ともずぶ濡れ。急いで着替えなきゃ。
Yanabayashi's shrine was closer to the radio building than the lab, so I decided to bring Kagari there. Mayuri had sent me a message on the way, so I had her come here first. I figured that Kagari needed Mommy Mayuri right now more than she needed me.
ママ。
Just like I thought, the second she saw Mayuri's face, she relaxed a little.
寒かったでしょ。お風呂沸かしてきますね。
Lukaku handed us towels to wipe away the rain and ran out of the room to start the bath.
お風呂ママと一緒がいい。マユシーと？うん、いいよ。あ、でもオカリンはどうする？
いや、俺はいい。かがりを先に入れてやってくれ。
うん、ありがとう。オカリンも風邪ひいちゃうから着替えだけでもしてね。
なんとかする。
I've seen this thing going on with Kagari before, I just don't remember where. Maybe I could borrow Lukaku's father's clothes? Just as I got up to leave the room.
ちゃんどうしたのかがりちゃん
Something was wrong with Kagari. She was staring at Mayuri's face, confused.
かがり？
誰えあなたは誰マユシーだよかがりちゃんかがり私の名前
かがり。
違う私は誰なの私は
Kagari tore at her hair and let loose a cry that sounded like it came from the pits of hell.
しっかりしろ、かがり。
痛いよママ助けてパパ助けて誰か助けて私を助けてよ誰か助けかがりちゃん
She was like a puppet whose strings had been cut. All the strength left her body and she fell forward. By the time I left Lukaku's house, the rain had stopped. We waited for a while after that, but Kagari showed no signs of waking up. She looked peaceful as she was sleeping, so I decided to leave her to Mayuri and Lukaku and head back to the lab. According to the two of them, she'd gotten confused several times in the past, but never like this. We might have underestimated how dangerous her situation really was. Her brain was probably under a lot of stress already. We needed a way to deal with this, and now... But for that... The second I opened the door, I heard Daru and Maho yelling. I ran inside without even taking the time to remove my shoes.
Okarin! なんつグッドタイミング!
岡部さん、びしょ濡れじゃない。
そんなことはどうでもいい。それよりも、やったのか？
Daru gave me a thumbs up.
でかしたダル！
スーパーハッカーなのだぜ。これくらい当然だっつーの。
He could say that, but I knew exactly how much talent and effort it took to hack CERN. Your average hacker couldn't do it. The name Super Hacker wasn't just for show. Yay, Daru! Good job!
私だってこれくらいどうってことなかったわ。
Wow, stuck her thumb up just like Daru had.
さすがだな。
まあ、これも全部あなたやかがりさんから情報を得られたからなんだけど、そういう意味ではかがりさんの中にクリスの記憶が残っていて助かったわね。
いや、それでも完成させたのはヒアジョーさんの力だ。
ありがとう。その言葉素直に受け取っておくわ。あとは実際にきちんと機能するかどうかが問題だけど、こればっかりは試してみるわけにもいかないのよね。
そうだな。
僕はキッチン二郎3回な。
Sure thing. Anyway, everything was ready. All that was left was to find out who they were. But that was still the biggest problem.
それじゃ私はちょっと眠らせてもらうわ。さすがに疲れる。
The sound of a ring phone cut her off.
もう誰よ。人がこれから寝ようって時に。はい、もしもし。
She muttered to herself as she took the phone to the back of the development room.
で、かがりたんの方はどうなん？
それなんだが。
Just as I spoke, a Ryan message arrived. I let out a small sigh of relief and sent back an answer.
実はあまり良くない。今日なんて真由里のことすら分からなくなった。
マジで？
それだけじゃない。その後ひどい頭痛を訴えて意識を失った。
それまずくね？
まずいな。なんとかしないと。
But unless we knew who we were up against, there was nothing we could do.
本 当ですか?
Dara and I exchanged glances at the sudden voice from the development room.
真帆たん、どうしたん?
何かあったのか?
When we looked inside, Maho turned around in a state of shock.
荒らされたって。私の借りてたホテルの部屋。
The call was from the hotel. Maho was staying at a business hotel in Wako City. Sometime in the past few days while she'd been staying here, someone had ransacked it. She left her keycard with the front desk, but there were signs that the lock had been picked. She'd just given her okay to search the room.
それで詳しい状況は分かったのか?
今から警察に連絡するから、何が盗まれてるか調べるためにも早く戻ってこいって。
じゃあ何が取られたかわからんってこと？もしかして下着とかも？
そういうのは全部持ってきてるわよ。セクハラで訴えましょうか？
うひー、それだけは勘弁。
まあ、私の部屋って普段から散らかってるから、荒らされてるように見えただけって可能性もある。楽観的に考えればね。鍵が開けられてたって言うから、誰かが入ったのは間違いないでしょうけど、実はついこの間もオフィスの方が荒らされたことがあって。
じゃあ単なる偶然じゃないな。何者かがヒヤジョーさんの持っている何かを探しているんだ。
そうね。でも何を探しているのかは見当がついてるわ。
なんだ?
クリスのノート PC よ。
あれか。
Putting all the pieces together, it seemed the most likely option. I could be sure that whoever tried to overwrite Kagari's memories was the same group that attacked her in the other world line. Whoever those people were, they were after the time machine theory hidden in Kurisu's memories. But since their experiment had failed and Kagari had escaped, they turned their attention to the other thing Kurisu had left behind. The laptop and hard drive that Maho had. But if they were after that, did that mean they had it now?
つかその PC ってこの前真帆たんが僕に託したやつ？
何？
実はね、どうしてもパスワードを解析したくて、ここにこもるようになってから橋田さんにお願いしたの。
それじゃあノート PC は
無事のはずよ。ね。
もちろん。今は僕の秘密のアジトにあるのだぜ。つってもずっとセルンのハッキングにかかりきりだったから、まだパスワードは解析できてないけどね。
That made me feel a lot better. Now, if only we knew who had broken into her room, but it wouldn't be that easy. Still, if they'd done something like that, they must be starting to panic. What would they do next? Wait a second.
もしかしたらこれは使えるかもしれない。
使えるって？
I didn't want to waste time explaining, so I just took out my phone and made the call. Several days later, Kagari's condition was getting worse. Staccato footsteps echoed through the darkness. The Kiyobara got quiet early. The ever-busy electronics stores, the concert halls that were filled with cheers, and the coffee shops that were full of laughter, all of that gave way to silence as soon as night fell. A single set of footsteps walked slowly through the silence, never breaking rhythm. They belonged to a girl. It was dark, and so it was hard to see her clearly, but it was very clear that she was acting strange. She had a cap pulled down over her face, and was trying to avoid letting anyone see her as she walked. As if she was hiding from someone, as if someone was chasing her. And just as she was about to turn a corner, several men jumped out in front of her. The girl stopped in surprise. Suddenly there were men behind her too. One of the men spoke. His Japanese was fluent, but if she listened carefully, she might have detected a trace of a foreign accent. The girl they called Kagari was helpless as they surrounded her. One of the men thought to himself, "This is the easiest job in the world. All they had to do was kidnap a single helpless-looking girl. There was no need to bring this many people." No, it wasn't just him. Almost everyone there felt the same way. Who are these guys, huh? The men gradually began to close in. The girl simply stood there afraid and showed no signs of resistance. This was too easy. just as the man smiled and reached out his hand. He thought he heard the sound of something slicing through the air, and then he fell to the ground, clutching his hand. It looked like 3 sausages lying on the ground. Before they realized that the sausages were the man's fingers, another man went down from a high kick to the head. Ow. The man began to howl in rage.
You fucking bitch!
Oh, that hurt. He looked at the girl, swearing, but that was naughty language too. One of the men who was trying to attack her from behind suddenly screamed. Watch your mouth, man.
静かにしな。あんまりうるさくすると、おめえらも困るんじゃねえのか?
A huge man came out of the darkness, silhouetted by the moon. Jeez, she hurt them pretty badly. Oh, ow! Oh, that was all I could say. Okay, he hurt them. I was watching the tough men go down one after the other. I knew from his size that Tenoji was strong. It was the other girl that really shocked me. Her disguise ruined, Suzuha jumped around like a cat. Each time she moved, the men around her quivered. I knew she'd undergone combat training, but I had no idea she was this strong when she was serious. The kicks from her long, lotus-like legs were like a work of art. The men fell to the ground without even having the time to draw their knives and guns. Several days earlier, when I realized that the enemy was probably starting to panic, I came up with a plan. In the last world line, Malika had told me that someone was looking for Kagari. I wondered if that was true in this world line too. So I asked Malika to leak some information for me. A girl matching Kagari Shina's description came down this road at the same time every day. And today, a few days later, they'd all taken the bait. I hung back behind the corner of an alley watching them fight. I felt kind of pathetic. But it was obvious that only would I be of no help whatsoever, I'd actually just get in the way. So it was smarter to leave it to them. They took their fingers off. I heard Tar's voice from the earphone in one of my ears. I called them and left the call connected so we could talk at any time. Tar had been opposed to Suzuha's plan to use herself as a decoy. He must have been worried about putting his daughter in danger. He'd be better off worrying about the people she was fighting. I suddenly heard a high-pitched whistle. At the signal, the men started to turn and run. They'd realized they'd fallen into a trap and decided to retreat. Tenoji's giant arms grabbed one of the men's hands, but there was a hollow popping sound and the man's body went limp. Oh, no way. He was dead? He took his own life? A piercing yell brought me back to my senses. One of the men was coming toward the alleyway where I was hiding. Our goal was to capture them and make them tell us who they were working for. If we couldn't do that, all of this would be for nothing. I ran out in front of the man without even thinking. A sudden appearance caused him to hesitate for a moment, but he kept charging without dropping his speed. I saw that he was holding on to something shiny near his waist. Just as he hit me, Suzuha slammed into him with a jump kick. The kick knocked him directly into Tenoji's waiting arms. Tenoji caught him easily, then spun the man's arms around his back so he couldn't hurt himself. Something like a scream came out of his mouth. At some point, Tenoji had jammed what looked like a towel into it. He was probably trying to keep him from killing himself like the last guy.
おいおい、あんまり暴れるんじゃねえよ。騒ぎになって困るのはおめえもだろうが。それにまだ1本目だぜ。情けねえ。あとまだ9本も残ってる。それが終わったら目だ。それから両方の耳、鼻。まだまだお楽しみはいっぱいあるんだぜ。
His voice was cold. This was the real Tenoji. This was FB. I wanted to look away, but Suzuo was watching without flinching in the slightest.
俺だって面倒な真似はしたくねえ。どうせ吐くんなら早めに吐いた方がお互いのためだと思うぜ。ん？どうだ？もう一本行くか。
The man shook his head violently.
最初からそうすりゃいいんだよ。で、おめえさんたちの元締めは誰だ
Tenoji took the towel out of the man's mouth. He said something in a whisper so small I couldn't hear it. Tenoji's power suddenly changed.
ストラト4？おい、冗談じゃねえだろな。
The man desperately shook his head again.
ストラト4か。また面倒な奴らが。
Strat 4. I'd heard of them. Back when I was into conspiracy theories, I'd looked them up on the internet. Their real name was Strategic Focus, I think. They were an American civilian intelligence company, sometimes called the Shadow CIA. They specialized in military matters, and their skills had supposedly been put to good use during the Iraq and Gulf Wars. If a certain rounder like Tenoji said they were a problem, they probably were. This wasn't going to be easy. But now wasn't a time for being scared. I felt myself starting to relax after I completed my first objective. But there wasn't time for that. This was where things really began.
どうしたの店長？何か気にかかることでも？
いや、ストラト4といや民間の会社だぜ。いわば金によって雇われてる連中だ。そんな奴らがいくら捕まったからって自決までするか？
It did seem strange, come to think of it.
おい、おめえ本当に
Tenoji tried to wring the man's neck again, but
気を失ってやがる。だらしねえやつだ。
Tenoji sighed and took out a rope, then started to tie him up.
後始末は俺に任せて、おめえらは行け。
いいんですか？
これで終わりじゃねえんだろ。
I was a little curious what he intended to do with them, but
わかりました。後のことはお願いします。
okay. I had other priorities right now. I said my thanks to Tenoji and hurried to the lab with Suzuha.
おじさん、早く。
わかってる。
Suzuha ran through the night like a panther. It was all I could do to keep up. The path to the lab seemed far longer than it usually did. We finally made it to the lab. Kagari, Ferris, and everyone else were already there waiting. And Kagari too. Kagari was lying on the couch in obvious pain. Her breathing was shallow. Her complexion was pale. Something bad could happen to her at any moment.
なる。どうだ？
ちょい待ち。前にハッキングかけた時のルートがあるから今探ってる。
前にって。お前、そんな危険なことをしてたのか？
ちょっとね、友達と賭けでね、どっちが早くハックできるか勝負したんだ。ゴーゴーカレー1年分。
You probably had no idea how dangerous that was.
あれ？どっちが勝ったか聞かないん？
From the way he was acting, there was no need to even ask.
とにかく、急いでくれ。
ラジャー。
Since their plan to steal back Kagari had failed, there was a good chance Stratford would resort to even more desperate measures. There was no time to waste, and
もない。
なんでもないことないにゃ。見せるにゃ。
Ferris ripped off my coat.
ひどい怪我してるにゃ。岡部さん、違う。オカリ。
I tried to avoid looking at it, but there was a lot more dark blood staining the side of my shirt than I'd expected to see. When the man had stabbed me before, it must have gone in pretty deep.
問題ない。
問題ないわけないにゃ。ルカにゃ、応急手当ての用意を。はい。
俺は大丈夫だ。前より、それよりもカガリは。
カガリちゃん、しかり。
Kagari was still lying on the sofa, panting for breath. For the last few days, she'd been getting weaker and weaker. Her hand reached up into the air.
ママ、どこにいるの？ママはここだよ。ちゃんとそばにいるよ。
Mary grabbed her hand tightly, and she finally smiled a weak smile.
ママ、私、このまま消えちゃうのかな。大丈夫だよ。きっとオカリンとダルくんが何とかしてくれるから。オカリンさん。そうだよ。オカリン、わかるよね。オカリンさん。
Kagari's lifeless eyes turned towards
心
me.
配しなくていい。もう少しで元通りになる。
岡部さん、私を消して。
カガリ。
No.
彼女の中から私を消して。このままじゃ彼女が。
Those were Kurisu's words. Personality and memory were two different things. Just because she had Kurisu's memories, that didn't mean she had Kurisu's personality. But
お願い、岡部、私を消して。
those were definitely Kurisu's words. At least that's how it seemed to me. I remembered what she'd said before. She told me to save Mayuri. She told me she couldn't sacrifice Mayuri to save herself. Maybe there was a tiny chance that Kurisu's memories would safely settle inside Kagari's mind. But even if they did, I knew what she'd chosen. She'd chosen to leave. She'd chosen to disappear. I had no way of knowing if the words coming out of Kagari's mouth were from another personality created by Kurisu's memories. But there was no doubt that they were Kurisu's words. Right now, she was nothing but a formless thing called memories. So why, even now, when she was nothing but memories, does she still have to suffer so much? Why does she have to suffer at all?
ごめんね、岡部。
Clear drops fell from her softly closed eyes.
誰？まだか？
Kurisu! I asked him to stop myself from screaming her name.
待って、もうすぐ。
まずいよ、おじさん。
Suzo whispered to me as she looked out the window.
1、2、3、何人か集まってきてる。ストラト4だ。
よし、来い。
The tension was rising every second. Was he done yet? Why wasn't he done yet?
シュー誰シュー来たビンゴ
Lukako and the others brought the treatment device over, but I motioned for them to stay back as I looked down at the monitor. Milo leaned over Daru's other shoulder.
重要そうなファイルの中からサイズの大きなものを選んで。
待ってよ、大きなのずっともしかしてこれかな。でもファイルネームジョンって。
モーツァルトの洗礼名はヨハネ。きっとそれだわ。
なんかよくわからんけど OK。てか中にもファイルがいっぱいあるんですけど。
見せて。
Inside the folder were several files labeled with codes.
ファイルが増えてる。私たちの研究段階じゃこんなに多くなかった。
which meant that after the Amadeus program was shut down, it had ended up in Stratfor's hands somehow, and they'd gone on to do more experiments with it.
この中のどれかがカガリさんの記憶データのはずだけど。
K6205 だ。
え
K6205 番がかがりの記憶だ。誰？
Potion number 620, the magic flute.
あった、これだ。
後の手はずは事前に話した通りに頼む。
Compared to Kurisu's time leap machine, the process was a lot simpler. Since the memory data already existed, there was no need for a VR headset or the phone wave. All we had to do was use a decoder program on Kagari's memory data, then use CERN's LHC to compress it. Then we transferred the compressed data and sent it to the cell phone.
早く！完全に囲まれた！
誰？準備はいいか？
俺オッケー。
よし、行くぞ！
待って！
I looked up and saw that Mala was staring at the screen, her features frozen in an iron mask.
どうした？岩城さん。
本当にうまくいくのかしら。もし失敗したら、かがりさんは。
I reached my arm around Dara's back and put my hand firmly on her shoulder.
大丈夫だ。俺が保証する。
岡部さん。おじさん！
かがり。
I stepped away from the PC and knelt down in front of the sofa where Kagari lay.
岡部さん。
いいな。
Goodbye. Kurisu.
来た！
誰？
了解。
The sound of footsteps coming up the stairs. The sound of the phone ringing. As all these different sounds filled the air.
あのね、岡部さん。
The last thing she said was,
私、多分、岡部さんのこと、あなたのこと。
Whether those were Kurisu's words or Kagari's. No! Her words were cut off by the sound of the door and the sound of screaming. I hesitated. Not only did I hesitate to answer, but I almost tried to tap the button to reject the call. But then Kagari's fingers cut mine off. And then her fingers, or maybe Kurisu's, tapped the button to answer the call. And then the phone up against her head stopped ringing. Oh, okay, did it work? Oh, the dizziness stopped. The room was pitch black. There was no one there but me. Even Suzuha, who should have been living here, was gone. Dara, Miri, Ferris, Luca, and Kagari too. Everyone was gone. I was so tired and sleepy. I clutched my smartphone and lay down on the sofa. I closed my eyes, too tired to think.
おかりん。おかりん。ねえ、起きて。もうお昼だよ。
Someone was shaking me softly.
おかりん、寝すぎだよ。もうすぐかがりさんも来ちゃうのに。
Kagari. The second I heard her name, my mind snapped back into alertness. I forced myself to sit up. I was sitting on the sofa in the lab. Outside the window, it was bright.
やっと起きたね。てってる。おかりん。
Hey.
Oh.
Mary nodded, satisfied, and left my side. I took a look around the room. The table was covered in notebooks and textbooks that seemed to belong to Mary. She was probably doing her homework. I could see Dara's huge back hunched over the PC. The monitor was displaying a cute anime character. He seemed to be playing another H game. From the look of things, the only people in the lab were him, me, and Mary. The time on my phone said it was just before noon. which meant I'd been asleep for more than 10 hours. Oh no, I must have passed out before I checked to see if the world line had changed. I listened for a moment and I could hear the usual bustling of Ikihabara outside. There was no sign of Stratfor. That alone made me feel relieved.
おかり、なんだかうなされてるみたいだったよ。大丈夫？
ああ。
麦茶飲む？寝起きでドクペはやめた方がいいよね。
そうだな。麦茶がいい。
わかった。
Mary went to the kitchen.
コップ全部使っちゃってる。今洗うからちょっと待っててね。
大丈夫。急がなくていい。
あ、まゆしまゆし、僕もお茶ちょうだい。
This all felt like an old memory. It seemed like ages ago when I'd last had a normal conversation like this. But this was no time to be sentimental. While Mayuri was washing the cup, I needed to get things straight in my head.
変動したんだよな。
In the end, I'd hesitated at the last second. If Kagari, or perhaps Kurisu, hadn't stopped me, maybe the world line wouldn't have changed and Stratfor would have caught us. But change it did. I could still feel the lingering sensations from my reading Steiner, so I was sure of it. From the look of things, Mayuri and Daru were the same as ever, and immediate danger was gone. The reason for the change was probably the deletion of Kurisu's memories from within Kagari. Those memories must have included something that dealt with a time machine, which meant that their existence was important enough to control whether or not the world line changed. And I deleted them.
いや、逆の可能性もあるな。
Maybe even if Mado's program hadn't worked right and the memory rewrite failed, the world line would have changed anyway. Unlike last summer, it wasn't clear what was making the world line change now. The first thing I needed to do was see if Kagari's memories had been successfully rewritten.
お待たせ。
This is scaring me. At the same time as I decided on my plan, Mayuri brought me a cup on a tray.
今麦茶出すからね。
She put the tray on the table and headed for the fridge. I looked and saw that there were 4 cups on the tray. 4.
前よりどうしてコップが4つあるんだ。
だってかがりさんも飲みたいだろうから。
That's right, Kagari.
かがりが来てるのか。
さっき LINE で連絡が来たよ。もうすぐ作って。
そうか。何の用で来るんだ。
オカリンが呼んだんじゃん。昨日 LINE で連絡よこしたっしょ。今日の正午にここに集合って。第3回かがりたんの記憶を取り戻す方法を考える会。メンバーはオカリンと僕とかがりたん。まあ今のところ成果ゼロだけども。
俺が呼んだ。
まゆしんも参加できたらよかったんだけど、今日はバイトがあるので。
I could hear Mayuri apologizing from the kitchen.
かがりさんの記憶早く戻るといいね。最近のこと以外何も覚えてないなんて寂しいもんね。
She didn't remember anything except the recent past. What was going on? Kagari should have still had her memories from when she was a kid. Maybe trying to rewrite her memories had actually deleted them.
はい、おかり。お茶どうぞ。
Mayuri handed me a cup filled with barley tea.
ああ、ありがとう。
I took the cup, trying my best to hide my eternal shock.
タルくんのはここに置いておくね。
どうも。
I gulped down the tea, stood up from the sofa, and went over to Daru.
誰？
何？
I lowered my voice so that Mayuri couldn't hear.
かがりの記憶の上書きは成功したのか、それとも失敗したのか。
Daru looked at me for a moment, confused.
何の話？
え？
That wasn't the answer I expected.
かがりの脳内に残っているクリスの記憶を消すのは成 成功したのかと聞いたんだ。
何その SF 設定怖い。オカリンついに中二病患者に復帰したん？
I froze for a moment. Dar didn't look like he was lying. He had no reason to lie anyway. Did that mean that in this world line, Kurisu's memories had never been implanted in Kagari?
ちょっと来い。
ねえ、僕エロゲしてるんだけど。
いいから。
I dragged Dar outside the room, leaving a very confused Mary behind.
サム、オカリン、僕を殺す気か。
いいから。ちょっとだけ付き合ってくれ。確認したいことがあるんだ。
He must have sensed that I was serious because after a moment's surprise, he nodded silently.
今のかがりは記憶がないのか？
そうだよ。つか何度も言ってるっしょそれ。
タイムマシンで過去に来る前の未来の記憶も含めて。
ないってば。覚えてるのはここ最近のことだけ。未来のことを覚えてたら、せめてマユシにはカガリタンの正体を教えてるし。
あ、それはつまりマユリはカガリが自分の娘だということを知らないんだな。
うん、それは秘密にしとくってオカリンが決めたんで。
ということはカガリが未来から来たことを知っているのは
僕とオカリンとスズハ。
それだけ？
それだけ。オカリンが他の誰かに話してなければ。
そうか、すまなかった。寝ぼけてたみたいだ。夢の内容が現実とごっちゃになったらしい。
気にすんなって。僕なんか24時間夢の中で生きてますから。キリッ。それにさ、僕としてはそういうテンション高いオカリンが久々だったから、なんか懐かしく感じたお。
Instead of answering, I took a second to think. It seemed like there were three main differences with Kagari in this world line. 1, she didn't have Kurisu's memories. 2, she didn't have her own memories of her childhood. 3, only me, Daru, and Suzuha knew who Kagari really was. In other words, Mary didn't know that Kagari was her daughter.
戻ったのか。
As Kagari seemed closer to the one I'd met before I jumped to the Alpha world line. Everything seemed mostly the same as before, including the fact that we were trying to get back her memories. Did this mean that a second world line change had sent me back to the old one? If I had the divergence meter, I could tell, but... I was starting to think like I used to. I chuckled at myself. I should stop. I decided to have nothing to do with the time machine or the time loop machine. All I could do was help Kagari get her memories back.
オカリン、なんかさっきから変じゃね？
いや、大丈夫だ。気にするな。
ならいいけど。つっか、いい加減寒いから戻っていい？
ああ、俺も凍えてきた。
Jar and I raced back inside the room. When I got back, I could just barely make out Mary's voice.
掴めるよ。
I'm feeling very strange right now. Mary hadn't noticed us come back in. She was putting her textbooks into her bag, and it sounded like she was also singing a
それ
song.
誰の歌だ？
It was only then that she realized I was there.
おかえり。寒いのにお外で何話してたの？
ちょっと今期のアニメについての意見交換をしてたのだぜ。
すごいね。
なあ、今の歌って。
あ、もしかして口ずさんじゃってた？探し物ひとつ、星の笑う声、風にまたたいて、手を伸ばせばつかめるよ。
I heard something fall near the front entrance. At some point, Kagari had opened the front door. She was standing there with a shocked expression, her mouth opening and closing. Her bag was lying at her feet. She must have dropped it in surprise when she came in. But did anything that surprising happen?
Ah, Kagari san. Tetteru.その歌、私知ってる。
そうなのか？
その歌は。
Kagari was trying to point at Mayuri, but shaking too much to do it.
その歌。
She fell to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut.
かがりさん。
かがり。
探し物一つ星の笑う声風にまたたいて手を伸ばせばつかめるよママ なーにかがりちゃんそれ何の歌？えへへこれはねとっても大事な歌なの。どんな歌なの？泣いている人を笑わせたいっていう歌かな。泣いてる人を笑わせるのが大事なの？それも大事だけどそうじゃなくてね、この歌はママとかがりちゃんをつなげてくれた歌なの。この歌があったから出会えたんだよ。その歌がなかったらママはかがりのママになってくれなかったかもしれないの？そんなのいや。ああごめんごめん、そういう意味で言ったんじゃないの。何があってもママはかがりちゃんのママだよ。でもそうだな、かがりちゃんにはこの歌覚えておいてほしいな。いつかかがりちゃんが大事な人と出会った時のために、その人が泣いている時笑わせられるように。ほら一緒に歌おう。探し物一つ星の笑う声探し物一つ星の笑う声。上手上手。次はね、ママどこに行ったの？ねえママいや行かないでママ。
Oh no.